Today, we are going to be comparing 6 different versions of Windows. These versions were all released from 2001 to 2022, and we're going to see which one is the best in performance out of all of them. From top to bottom, we have Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7 on the first row, and Windows 8.1, Windows 10, and Windows 11 on the second row. All are running Pro versions and all are fully updated, as well as all of them running on the same hardware. Speaking of which, this is the hardware that I'm running all of these operating systems on. I know it's not that great, however this was the only computer I had at the time that ran all of these versions of Windows, hence why I used it for this test. This computer originally shipped with Windows Vista on it, but it had drivers for XP and later versions of Windows. Now getting into the actual tests, the very first one we start with is the startup test, which should give a good idea as to how the rest of the test will play out. Fast boot is disabled on the newer OSs to make this test fair. As you can see, Windows XP boots impressively fast, with Windows Vista coming in second and Windows 8.1 coming in a couple seconds after Vista. After that, it's Windows 7 and then way later, like a lot later, Windows 11 comes in fifth and Windows 10 is in dead last. And yeah, as you can kind of tell, I ran out of script here. But Windows 11 comes in a lot later and then Windows 10 comes in just right after that. After startup, I checked storage to see how much each operating system uses, and to nobody's surprise, Windows XP used the least while Vista used the most, and all of the others were around the same to each other, aside from Windows XP. For the next test, I compared the amount of RAM being used by each, starting with the idle usage, and again Windows XP won with just 900 megabytes at boot. The rest were gradually increasing, with 11 actually using the most. However, with 20 MyPal tabs open, Windows XP still had the least amount used at 2.5 gigabytes, but only slightly, and the difference was a lot nearer now, with Windows 11 using 3.1 gigabytes of RAM. In the next test, which was comparing idling temperatures, this was the first test where Windows XP didn't win automatically, and surprisingly, Windows 10 actually won instead. However, Windows 7's temperatures were alarmingly high for some reason. Moving on to the Wi-Fi speed test, this test was slightly scuffed due to me switching ISPs from Rogers to Bell when I recorded Windows 10 and 11's results. But for download, 11 performed the absolute best at 70 megabytes and Vista did the worst at 46. However, in upload, Windows XP came back to claim its crown again, uploading at 20 megabytes a second, with 11 doing the worst at a measly 9 megabytes per second. The thing I find is that fast Wi-Fi doesn't actually mean anything if you can't load any websites any faster. So for the next test, I loaded YouTube on all machines, and Windows XP loaded it the fastest, with Windows 7 loading the slowest, interestingly enough. After YouTube, I loaded Yahoo, which is a pretty picture-intense website, and it was the exact same result, literally the exact same places. I noticed in this test that the newer operating systems loaded websites the fastest, aside from Windows XP, which has the advantage of just being stupidly light. Up next is a video export using a video editor named VSDC. I'm exporting the same exact clip on all machines at their default settings. Speeding things up a little bit, you can see Windows Vista takes the win on this test, while Windows 7 continues its losing streak by getting last yet again. I don't know what's going on with Windows 7, to be honest. The audio export test was much shorter even while using the same clip. This time, Windows XP and 8.1 tie in first, and Vista ends up last, ironically. Now we get to the fun part, starting with the default applications. And for this test, we're starting with Notepad, of course, and this time Windows 8.1 loads Notepad first while Windows 11 loads it last. And this will be a pretty prevalent trend throughout this test. After that, we have WordPad, which is basically the light version of Microsoft Word, back when Google Docs didn't exist, and Windows XP yet again loads this one the fastest. And after that, we have Calculator, which the newer versions of Windows get absolutely wrecked in due to them having to load the UWP versions of the Calculator app, which are for some reason much heavier. Finally, we have Paint, which once again continues the trend of loading faster on Windows XP and loading slowest on Windows 11. It's pretty clear that for default applications, older operating systems are really just better than the newer operating systems. But people don't just use their computers for default applications, they use it for Office programs too. Starting with the same Word document, and yes, I'm using Office 2010 because it is the only version that runs on all 6 operating systems, Windows 8.1 loads it the fastest. After that, we got the same Excel document, which Windows 8.1 and XP end up tying in, and 7 loads it last. After Excel is the same PowerPoint, which once again goes to Windows 8.1, and Windows 7 loads it the slowest yet again. And finally, we have a PDF in Adobe Acrobat, which loads at the same time in first on Windows 10 and 11, and the same time in second on XP and 8.1. And if you guessed Windows 7 loaded it the slowest, you would be right again. After you finish working, you might want to relax with some music or a movie, and that's where the media files test comes in. Starting with the same audio file, Windows 8.1 loads it at the fastest while Vista loads it at the slowest. Next up, with the same video file of Big Buck Bunny, this time XP loads it the slowest for no apparent reason, I didn't know why either. And finally, in the last test, I loaded the same 8K photo on all, and XP loaded it the fastest, whereas 10 loaded the picture much slower than all the others, again for no apparent reason. Now for another test that tests the capability of the hardware, we have the archive test. Compressing the desktop on all machines into the same .7z file, we can see that once again, XP compresses the fastest, and Windows 7 yet again comes in last place, with 8.1 and 10 tying it up in this test, interestingly enough. However, when extracting that same archive to the desktop, the results are completely flipped around. Instead of Windows XP getting first, Windows 11 actually ends up first instead, while Windows XP ends up in last place. For the last test, I decided to end off on the USB copy test. Copying the same archive I just made into the same USB drive in the same port, you can see that Windows XP gets first place like it has been for the past little while Windows Vista and 8.1 especially take the longest. 8.1 took over 3 minutes for this test. Not sure what happened there honestly, but it doesn't look that great for 8.1. Benchmarks were a bit of a sore subject due to the CPU benchmarks not wanting to run on all of the operating systems. Starting with Geekbench 2, which wouldn't launch on Windows 11 and 10, Windows XP takes the lead on Geekbench 2. Moving to Cinebench R11.5, this time Windows 7 refused to launch it, but Windows 11 actually did the best out of all the computers for this benchmark. And finally, the disk test actually worked properly on all OSs, and Windows Vista won in sequential read, while 7 won in sequential write. So now we've reached the end of this video. In conclusion, you really shouldn't choose an OS based off of performance solely, as there are some things it will excel at and some things it'll do really poorly at. You should choose an OS based on features that matter to you, such as stability or UX design. If I had to assign a winner in this test, it would likely be Windows XP. I'm not surprised that it won considering how light it is. And if I had to pick a loser, it would either be Windows 7 or Windows 11, as both consistently got last a lot of the speed tests. I hope you all enjoyed this speed test. Click here to see my last speed test that I made, and click here to see my latest video. I'll see you all next time.